Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Voices of Humanity show. My name is Guy Dawson, and I am your host. And I am here with Edward Bevilacqua. He is the education director of Novum U, organization that is doing incredible things to help prisoners to become better educated. Welcome to the Voices of Humanity show, Edward.
Thank you, Guy, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about a little bit about what we do today. And it was a pleasure meeting you last week at the Lions Club. Had a great time, just really good people.
I was listening as you gave a talk. Is it Ed or Edward? Should I use Ed or Edward?
Ed's great. Edward, Ed, either way.
All right, Ed. As I was listening to Ed give his presentation in Lions Club, which, by the way, is an amazing organization. It's the largest service organization in the world, and I've been a member for a short time. I was listening to Ed, and he was talking about the things that he was doing as a part of his organization to help with prison reform, particularly from the educational perspective. So, Ed, tell me, what is Novum U all about? How did it get started, and how did you become a part of that nonprofit organization?
Okay, well, thank you again, Guy. Novum U is a school that helps people in prison and when they get out of prison. So we're unique in several ways. But one way we're unique is in Nevada, you either have programs that help educate people while they're in prison or when they get out of prison. You don't have things that cross over. So today in prison, we have almost 800 inmates in our correspondence course. And let's see, where's our magazine? And we have, this is a magazine that we publish and distribute into all of the prisons and camps in Nevada, plus prisons in 6 other states, mainly Western states, but including Florida and Illinois. So we are a school that helps people in prison learn important skills on how to leave prison behind. And then when people get out of prison, we provide the essential things that you need to move ahead. So we provide housing, counseling, education, and employment, and the other things that go along with that, so that we have a vertically integrated process to help people break the chains of recidivism, because that's fundamentally what is it about. It's about helping people not go back to prison. So that's what we do. And so we have right now 800 people in prison, active students, in about 800 active students in prison, and we house 70 students in our student housing when they get out. So that's, kind of an overview of what we do. Why do we do it? Well, we do it because it needs to get done. We can't just keep discarding people and putting them in prison. Just as Judge Scotty said last week, we treat animals better than we treat people in prison. In the last year with COVID, people have been kept in there, as Judge Scotty called it, a cage. We have a little nicer term for it called a prison cell, but it's fundamentally a cage. It's a concrete cage for 23 hours a day. And that borders on being inhumane, and getting 15 minutes every other day to take a shower is, we got to do something about it. And so if you treat people that way for a long period of time, and then when they get out of prison, you just somehow miraculously expect that they're going to be okay, that they're going to be able to get a job and keep a job and have housing and pay their bills and somehow get credit and somehow get ID. And it's just, it's not, doesn't work for too many people. So that's why we do what we do. Somebody's got to do it. Why not us?
I guess a lot of us, we hear that when people go to prison, there are programs that are designed to rehabilitate them. They can go to school while they're in prison, that they work while they're in prison, and that's a part of the rehabilitation process. If that's so, what is the need for bringing an outside organization into the prisons in order to do essentially the same thing?
Well, okay, so in fairness to the Department of Corrections across the country, I'm not talking about Nevada, I'm talking about across the country. When COVID hit, all outside programs, all programs got closed. They stopped letting outside people into the prison for fear that somebody with COVID was going to come in and everybody was going to get wiped out. So, you might remember a year ago, people were kind of literally deathly afraid of COVID. So the prisons stopped visiting, stopped religious services, stopped Bible studies, stopped education programs, stopped virtually everything because of fear of COVID, because it's kind of a closed environment, right? If one person gets sick, you could have 3,000 people in the prison and half of them dying, was kind of the thought last year. However, more than that or beyond that, if you think about it, state employees, what type of a state employee would want to work in education in a prison for adults? One of the better people or one of the mediocre people? And so it's fundamentally, there are just too many mediocre people in prison that it's their job. They're not passionate about it, or maybe they are passionate about it, but the system isn't designed to help passionate instructors. Oops, sorry about that. It's not designed to have passionate instructors help people. And so they are really at a disadvantage. In fact, I think in an ideal world, it should be the purpose of prisons is to keep people locked up in a relatively safe environment. And they should reach out to the community of people to let outsiders come in and set up prison release programs. So let's say you're in the construction business. A reasonable trade-off would be, hey, we're going to let you come in and train people how to do construction work as long as you're willing to hire them when they get out. And a construction guy would say, that sounds good to me. Okay, you're going to pay me to basically train my employees. That's a reasonable plan. But that's not how it works. Is right now the prisons are kind of like the largest mental health facility in the state. The the quality of education is not good. It's just they're not designed to do it. It's none of their core business. So there is no. So the bottom line is there is no rehabilitation in prison. And I think per Judge Scotty last week, if people knew that what was actually going on in prison, it would be this is not acceptable. We're going to actually rehabilitate people. We're going to have programs to do that. Now there are some. There's so in Nevada there's a an automobile shop thing. But there's only about 25 people that work in the auto shop refurbishing cars in a prison that has almost 2,000 people. So is that rehabilitation? Is that a program to rehabilitate people when 20 people are involved in doing that? Or you have a couple people that are electricians, sort of, or plumbers, sort of. It's not a good system, and I don't want to go on ranting, but it's not. There is no rehabilitation in prison, and on the education side, it is getting a GED or a high school diploma in prison is nowhere near the spectrum of an 18-year-old getting a college or high school diploma out on the street. As bad as Nevada is, I think number 48th in the country, somebody getting their GED or high school diploma in prison is not. It's not comparable.
How high is the demand for your programs in prison? As you had mentioned before, a lot of things got eliminated because of COVID, and there are limited ways that the prisoners can really constructively use their time. How many of the prisoners are interested in being a part of the educational programs that you bring into the prisons?
Well, that's really a good question. and it's kind of like what got us started in this in the first place, which was, one of your initial questions to me. So, if you think of all of the people in prison, some people can't be helped. Okay, let's say they consider themselves an outlaw. There's some people that prison is their home. When they get out of prison, they're on vacation. This is my home. There's some people like that, not very many. There are some people that are physically or mentally unable to really make a go of it when they get out. Their body is broken. We get people put into our program that have come out of prison and they have brain cancer, they have liver cancer, they have lung cancer that they got while they were in prison. And those people really don't have a shot. So some of the people in prison you can't help. Other people in prison don't need help. They just need the system to get out of their way. It's like, I have a job waiting for me. I have a wife. I have a family. I have a car. I have a this. I have a that. I have an education. Just please let me get back to life. Then there's everyone else. And our program is one area that our program is unique is we go for the people who would not get out of prison without us. So there are other programs that focus on the people in prison that need very little help when they get out. They kind of have, like, if it's family reunification, if the thing is, our number one thing is family reunification. Well, if you have a family, that means there's a house, there's probably a car, somebody's got a job, things are happening. That's a lot different than getting out of prison without having a house or a family or money or a job or an education. Those are the people that we go for, the people who need it the most. And, why did we go after those people? Well, in Nevada, you don't get out of prison unless you have an approved place to go. In California, for example, when it's your day to go on parole, you're getting out. You can't say, I'm not ready, let me stay. In Nevada, if it's your day to parole, you have to have an approved place to go, or they don't let you out until your term is over. And there are good reasons for that. One argument would be, why should we let people out of prison who have no money, no job, no skills, they have no support system, they don't have a place to live? Why would we want to force somebody to go out of prison under those conditions? They have no chance of making it. They're going to end up at Catholic Charities or Salvation Army, and that's just going to sink them further down into mental distress and trauma. And so why would we let them out? So in Nevada, you don't get out unless you have a place to go. Our program that's what we focus on is those people. And we try to give them an education when they're in prison. That's our correspondence course with about 800 people today. And then when we get out, we try to move them along over a 90-day period to success. What does that mean? Stable and meaningful employment and a livable wage job. That's what our goal is. So, probably should have said that in the beginning, Guy.
Do they seek you out, or how do they find out about the program?
Okay, so it's mainly, this is kind of the point of the spear is the magazine. And we kind of, not really joke, but we sort of joke like prisons are one of the few places left in the country where a magazine is really highly in demand. And you might remember from the magazine, it actually feels good when you're holding it, right? It's heavy, the paper's thick, it's got a good weight to it, it's got a good shine, the pictures are crisp. And so we send magazines into the prison, people share the prison, we invite people to join our correspondence course, and we send in about 1,000 emails a week also with additional homework. And we have boxes. I'll just show you a box of mail. So this is about, this is about a month's worth of homework. So figure we get about 50 letters a day, 50 people turn in homework assignments a day. That's pretty impressive for our program. And they're heartfelt, they're well-reasoned arguments. People are doing their best, and it takes so little to encourage people to improve. That's what we do.
Yeah, that was really impressive to see that, Ed. And I think there's a lot of misconceptions out there about people who are incarcerated, what their what their real thoughts and perspectives are, what they truly want to do with their lives. And obviously, when you look at a box that's full like that, with people making inquiries, wanting to know more about your program, looks like there's quite a few people out there who really do want to turn their lives around.
There are. And so, you take the people, so back to your question, you take the people who are in prison and you provide a means for them, you provide a little path. We try to provide a path for them to follow to leave prison behind for good, to cultivate, a life of meaning and purpose.
Absolutely. And you had mentioned something before. You were talking about recidivism. Maybe you could explain what recidivism is and how your program lessens the rates of recidivism. It's a word I know what it means and you know what it means, but I'm not sure if all of our audience knows what that means.
It's one of those tricky words. So recidivism basically means going back to prison. The question is, what is the recidivism rate? And the answer to that question is it depends. So it kind of is like Mark Twain said, there's three types of lies: lies, damn lies, and statistics. And so when people talk about recidivism, the question is, what do you mean by recidivism? How was it measured? And in Nevada, recidivism is measured by people returning to prison because of a new crime, not because they violated their parole, not because they went to prison for doing the same thing they were doing before. And so in Nevada, the true recidivism rate, which would be how many people that went to prison and got out of prison start committing crimes within 3 years, the answer is probably like 85%, 90%. Maybe they don't get caught. Maybe they're clever at doing it. Maybe they do it less. But I think in Nevada, the authorities say that Nevada has one of the lowest recidivism rates in the country, like maybe 40%. But again, it's just how do you calculate that if you say people going back to prison for a new charge versus the same charge, which would mean violating their parole, it's a very different number. And 96% of people come out of prison alive. So that means they're going to come to our communities. And as citizens, as residents of the state here in Nevada, what are we going to do about that? We could ignore the problem. We could say we want more people to get arrested and go back to prison. But if they're going to get out of prison again, that's just not good. Today we had 8 people get out of prison into our program. And I went around the room, how many times have you been to prison? And how many times each person? And half of them had been to prison more than 3 times. The most had been 6 times to prison. And half of them, this was their first time in prison. I think we should say there's something wrong. If somebody's going back to prison 6 times or 5 times or 4 times, there's something wrong with the system. Maybe it's not the person, maybe it's the system that we have to focus on. And, it comes back to, if you don't have rehabilitation programs that start in prison and continue after you get out of prison, if there's not continuity, why would you think that the program would be any good? Recidivism is not a problem while you're in prison. Recidivism is a problem when you're out of prison. So I think, a group of 6th graders would probably say, you can't solve recidivism from inside a prison. You got to solve recidivism when you get out of prison. And there are very few programs. We're unique. Our program is it's a school. So you're living not on campus, but our classrooms are 3 blocks away. You're living in the program. You go to school. We get you a job. We do all of the things that we need you to do for a 90-day period. Why 90 days? Well, it kind of works out if you get out of prison and you can't make a go of it in 90 days, you're probably going to be going back to prison. It's not exactly the case, but if you can't make a go of it in 90 days, you're probably going to go back to prison. And if you can be employed for 9 months, you probably are not going to go back to prison. So our program, it focuses on that first 90 days, well, before you get out of prison, but then our other focus is the first 90 days when you get out of prison. And, we have to, our goal, let me say it this way. Why is recidivism a problem? Why can't people get out of prison and become successful? A lot of people take the inelegant, simple answer is, well, they went to prison. Naturally, they can't get a job. They were in prison. And the answer to that is no, wrong. It's not prison. It's not that they went to prison. The reason it's a problem is because they don't have skills. So just imagine you don't have a high school education and you spent 5 years in prison. You're 35 years old. Guy, what kind of job are you? Who's going to hire you? You're 35. You've been in prison for 5 years. You don't have a high school education. What are you going to do? Who's going to hire you?
Yeah, it's challenging because then again, you've got this whole period of your life where you were basically just separated from society.
Yeah.
So along with being uneducated, I mean, you can't. It's so challenging for people.
Yeah. So it's hard to get a job. So you might get a job that you don't feel provides the right status for you. Let's say you have a job and you wear a little cardboard, little paper hat, and you're serving people donuts or something. It's like, I can't see myself doing it. That's not my self-image. And that's not a sustainable job. So what we see is the challenge that people have to success. The obstacle is not that they were in prison. The obstacle is that they don't have skills. Okay, so then what's the solution if you don't have skills? Learn skills, right? Go to school. You learn skills. You learn the skills that employers want. Well, it kind of turns out that in order to learn the skills that you need to learn in order to get the job you want, you also have to have housing. You can't say to people, well, school starts at 8 tomorrow, have somebody drop you off or catch the bus. Life gets in the way. That's why we have to provide housing. And then we have to provide hygiene. We have to provide food. We have to provide a smartphone. We have to provide all of those services so that people even have the ability to go to school to learn. Now, we're lucky that we have employers, chiefly 7-Eleven is probably the best employer, and it's also a good job for people. We have employers that will hire our people because they care more about their future than their past. And that's what we call a foundational job. A foundational job serves 3 purposes. And this is another area where we are unique from other people who do what we do. Other people get you a job and say, Mazel tov, you have a job, go take care of your family. Our job, our first job is called foundational job. And we say first job is worst job. And that doesn't mean the job is bad. It means the next job is better. And then the next job is better than that, and better than that, better than that, better than that. And so for us, a foundational job serves 3 purposes. First, it closes the gap in your work history. So right now you haven't had a job for 5 years or 10 years or however long you've been in prison, right? A lot of people will hire people who went to prison, but not a lot of people like to be the first person to hire somebody who went to prison. So in our foundational job, the first goal is we close the gap. So when you're going to look for the job that you want to get, you already have a job. You're employed. That it's information that you're in prison for 5 years, but somebody hired you now. That's the first thing. The second purpose of our foundational job is to provide people. It's like your practice job. You haven't been an employee for a while. Can't really expect you to be a good employee. There's no reason you should be a good employee. So your first job, your foundational job, is your practice job. So you can learn to become a good employee when you go to the job you actually want to get. And then the third thing is it provides money for people. They have some spending money, and then they get to learn the habits that fiscally responsible people have. All adults who have a decent credit score all do the same thing. They pay their bills. They have money and they pay their bills. So our program is really mostly paid for by students out of their job. It's like real life. You pay, you go out, we get you a job, and the money that you get paid, you use to pay for your housing and your tuition. And so that's what we do. And that is also unique because other people rely upon grants and donations. And what you're doing is you're creating an entitlement system. People get rewarded just for showing up. And, as you know, in your life and with your podcast and your marketing business and everything you do, you don't get clients just because somebody has to hire you, right? You have to provide a service that people want to pay for. And so we have to spend a lot of time educating our students that the world is thus. You have to provide a service that people are willing to pay for. And then when they pay you, you have to have the discipline to pay your bills. And guess what happens when you do that? You feel good, right? You feel like you're successful. So that's what we do. We've had some really good success stories, and we've had people that have had some real challenges in life.
Yeah, I would imagine that it varies, but it seems like it's the support net that you're providing for them, preparing them when they're in prison for eventually being back out in the world again. But they have, rather than just being on their own, which is what usually happens with most prisoners, they're on their own. They're out in the world, as you had mentioned. A lot of times they don't have any money. They don't have a job. They don't, and it's really basically kind of setting them up to fail. It seems like you guys, with the support group and the network that you're putting around them, you're supporting them basically to win. You're setting them up to win rather than to fail.
Thank you. That's a great way of saying that. I think we're going to use. Can we use that line? Setting
Absolutely.
not to fail. That's and that's an easy soundbite for people to get, right? We're here to set you up to win, not to fail. And the challenge we have is, what is the definition of insanity? Do you know that one? What's the definition?
Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result.
Right. So part of our challenge is people want a different result, but they really don't want to change who they are. And it kind of doesn't really work that way. That's kind of the definition of insanity, right? I want to be who I am, but I want to be better. I want to be successful. And it's like, no, you have to do the things that successful people do. And, number one thing is you have to be trustworthy. If we can't trust you, if your employer can't trust you, if your neighbors can't trust you, if your family can't trust you, life is really, really hard. What we've observed from people is if you're born into an environment where trust is not a key component, it's not I don't think that trust is something that people are born knowing is important. I think it's a cultural thing. And if you grow up in a really harsh life where anything you get, if you believe anything you have, somebody's going to try to take from you, trust is not part of that equation. It's like you get conditioned to not trust people. And if you get conditioned to not trust people, you can't really be that trustworthy yourself, right? Because if you can always trust me and I can't trust you, I'm always going to lose, because if I tell you I'm going to do something, I'm actually going to do it. If you tell me you're going to do something, you may or may not do it. I can't trust you, but you can trust me. So you're going to get me to do something, and then you're not going to reciprocate. And, the interesting thing is, if you grow up in an environment where trust is not part of the equation, non-trust is normal. And it's hard for people to accept that, no, you gotta put those, you gotta stop that behavior. You gotta put those weapons aside, and you have to adopt a different life. And that's probably the hardest problem that we have in helping people become successful is they fundamentally sabotage and they bite the hand that's the person that's trying to help them. It's why it's kind of really, really hard doing what we do, because every day you're trying to help people who, on one hand, no matter what you do, it's not enough. And on the other hand, because they are not trustworthy, they don't trust you. You know, say, hey, I'm here to help you do this. Well, maybe you're not. Why are you really doing this? I don't believe you. Nobody would act that way. And it's really counterproductive. So our lucky being invited to the Lions Club thing, having this thing out there, if we can get, in quotes, normal people out there to understand that the challenge is we operate a certain way, and a lot of people were brought up under a different belief system, and they just see life differently than we do. And as I said the other day, it's like we have to go to the margins so that the margins disappear, and there's no us and them. There's only us. We have to do that. Otherwise, we're going to continue discarding people and writing them off, and we're going to have this prison recidivism problem is just not going to go away.
I would imagine that's a big part of this whole process, Ed, is educating the community about the importance of truly rehabilitating prisoners, the ones who want it. Of course, as you mentioned, some just aren't going to want to do it for a lot of reasons, but those who truly want to change and not just be the same person as you had mentioned before and get a different result, we know that that's impossible. But people who truly do want to be a different person than the person that actually committed those crimes, how beneficial that is to our society, because your property is at risk. Your personal beingness is at risk when it may not seem important that these prisoners are getting out and they're not being rehabilitated until something happens to you, when it may have possibly have been avoided if that prisoner had an opportunity maybe to turn their life around and just never had the opportunity. Maybe we should be paying attention more and not so much just thinking, well, it doesn't affect me, because you never know when it could affect you.
Yeah. You're actually very good at this, Guy. How long have you been doing this?
I have been a broadcaster for 10 years.
Wow. Okay. So you're good at this. This is, you get right to the heart of it. And I appreciate it. Yeah, the problem cannot be solved by letting them solve it, meaning the prison system rehabilitate people. It's not designed to do that. Historically, that's not the purpose of prisons, is to rehabilitate people. The purpose of prisons is to lock up people who don't obey the laws of society for as long as the judge says they need to be locked up. And somebody had the bright idea, well, while they're in there, why don't we educate them? And I think we went off track when we decided to let mediocre people do the education, and instead of having the community take the responsibility. Because in one sense, you could say there was a social contract with everybody who went to prison when they were young, right? There's this social contract. We're going to educate you. You're going to be a member of our community. And I think the community should take some responsibility as to why did these people end up going to prison? And, you can look at it, a lot of people who end up going to prison, they didn't have a great life when they were 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 or whatever. They had a really hard life. I told about one of our students named Maria, whose introduction to heroin was her mother when she was a young girl. That her mother had a very stressful life. She was a maid during the day, housekeeper at a motel or something during the day, and at night she was a prostitute. And the father was very abusive, and he wasn't really around. They split up, and the mother was trying to raise this daughter, and her life was really frantic. And Her hair was always on fire. There was all these problems. And so that was the girl's normal. That was Maria's normal, except the way her mother would calm down is she'd take out her pipe and um, smoke heroin and then pass out. And she would be very peaceful and calm. And Maria, who didn't know the difference at that point, what is her perception of heroin? It's a way to calm down and feel good. So she started smoking heroin when she was, I think she said 12. And then actually it wasn't Maria, but other women have said that they had a very dysfunctional life because they had a dysfunctional childhood, and heroin was their lover. Like they would write poetry to heroin. They go through the day at work just waiting to get home because they had a dysfunctional life, and they would have heroin. And then, of course, things spiral out of control. They end up in jail and end up going to prison. And so, yeah, the community, we need to create awareness for the community. And when we find people, kids that have a bad life, I don't think, well, our school's approach is we need to help repair the parents so they can repair their kids. The other choice would be to take the children away from their parents. And that's just not a thing that is acceptable in our society, our community. And, after school programs and these programs and those programs, yeah, they're probably marginally successful, but over the long terms, I don't think they've shown to reduce recidivism at all. Because if your dad goes to prison or you go visit your dad in prison or your mother in jail, that becomes normal to you, right? That's like there's no stigma associated with it. It's just what people do. And so, if your mother smokes heroin and that calms her down, and your first perception is, yeah, well, heroin isn't really bad, you're probably going to follow that path. And so we, as the community, we haven't done our job in helping these problems. Not that people don't try. I think everybody kind of tries, and people go work at food banks and they donate their clothes, their used stuff, and they do stuff like that. But working at the food bank makes you feel good for a day, but that person has to eat every day. And so that's kind of like you don't go to the margins to change people. You go to the margins so that they change you. And we get rid of the us and them, and there's only that us. And we are in kinship with the people who need help the most. And I think that's the approach we have to have. And that's, we follow Homeboy Industries out of Los Angeles, Father Boyle, Jesuit priest. And that's his message. And, we do what they tell us, or we do what they say. And it's about going to the margins. So like I said at the Lions Club is not the place you go to. It's the place you come from to go out and help other people. And as you said, they're, it's a tremendous organization that's out there helping people. So we go to the margins to help the people at the margins, but the margins disappear. There's no longer us and them. There's only us. And so, yeah, to your point, creating community awareness is vital. Tomorrow, the Lions Club's mobile eyeglass or eye screening service is coming here, and we expect that 60 people will get their eyes checked because, just imagine this. You can see, I can see, I have contact lens. Do you wear glasses, Guy?
No.
Contacts? Reading glasses?
No, I'm blessed with really good eyes.
You're blessed. Okay, good. So imagine if you're learning to type and your eyes have to be 4 inches away from the screen for you to be able to see. That would be pretty tough, right?
Yes.
How would you feel going out into the world and not being able to identify things? It's just shapes and colors and noises. What would that do for your confidence and your ability to move forward?
Yeah, it definitely hinders you don't feel like you're able to do things that normal people are able to do. So definitely I think it would be debilitating to your confidence.
We take being able to see for granted. I
Yeah.
mean, you don't have any kind of eye support. I have one contact lens, but I can wear reading glasses. Um, just imagine, it's hard for us to even imagine what it would be like if we could not read a sign that's 6 feet away or a street sign. I can't drive. How would that be? You're riding a bus, and how do you know where to get off the bus? Type of thing. I mean, it's really, really hard. So, um, the Lions Club deserves a lot of credit for having these mobile vision screening things. And, I think, as people in the community of Las Vegas, it would be great if we could figure out a way to have all homeless people have their eyes checked and then give people glasses. It's just like, this is our campaign. This is what we're going to do. And I think you would see there would be less of an us and them. It's just there's only we have to make sure every one of us can see. And when everybody can see, there's no us and them. There's no, here's the people who can see and here's the people who can't see. It's just, there's only us. And it's only us trying to solve the problem. And I think that's the main kind of thing with Novum U, with our school, is we try to create a community of kinship with our students, and our students with the community, and employers with our school, and employers with our students, and our students with customers of these employers. And if we could get everybody to do that, I think we would make some real progress in reducing recidivism. And it starts with people like you, way more than me. I'm just a guy that's every day coming to school trying to help people. But your role of creating podcasts, because you have the ability to share this message with, I don't know, 5 Brazilian people, maybe hundreds.
Well, hopefully.
With a lot of people, you have the ability to do that. And it really, to your point, it really takes the community to do things to help solve the problems that too many people have. And people want to help.
So true. And one of the most impressive parts of the presentation that you did at the Lions Club the other day, Ed, was the judge. And the judge standing up and talking about his past. He was really a conviction-oriented judge. He was very open about it. He believed in sending people to prison. And then he had a change of heart. Maybe you could share with the audience what that represents, and the big shift that he's had. Now he's a part of your organization.
Yeah. So again, going back to this, there's us and there's them. Judge Scotty got to be a judge because he did all the right things. Went to a good undergraduate school, USC, went to a good law school, Hastings in San Francisco, went and worked for good law firms, worked his way up to be a district court judge here in Las Vegas. And you kind of you get to rise the ladder because you see the world as other people see it. And it's kind of like, it's just a very simple thing. There are those people who should not be out in society, out in the community, because they won't follow the rules of the community. And if they're not going to follow the rules, it's somebody else's job to teach them how to follow the rules. My job as a judge is to enforce the rules. And this guy won't play by the rules, so we got to send him to prison. But then he started talking to people who are in prison and finding out what prison is like. And, example that a lot of people give is, nobody would think if you put somebody in an insane asylum for 3 years that they would come without treatment, that they would come out cured, right? You have a crazy person, you put them in an insane asylum for 3 years. How are they going to be when they come out? Better or worse or the same?
Probably worse.
Yeah. Okay. So why wouldn't that apply to prison? You take people who won't follow the laws of society, you lock them up, you put them in a cage, you only let them shower every other day for 15 minutes, and it's a cold shower. And do you remember why Judge Scotty said that it was a cold shower?
No, I can't. I remember him talking about that, but I couldn't. I can't.
The boiler has been broken for 6 months.
Oh, that's right. You did say that.
And then he kind of got, righteous indignation about, we cannot treat people like animals. Because if we do treat people like animals, what are we going to expect them to be like when we let them free?
Right.
They're going to be the way they were, or maybe even upset, more frustrated than when they went in. And, unfortunately, I believe, took the wrong approach. We as a society 100 years ago took the wrong approach. And that was thinking that just like we had public schools could best educate students. I think we had the misguided idea that we could hire mediocre people to be instructors in school and that we would turn out successful people. And, it's not the same thing. Children are like, when it comes to learning, children are like sponges, right? It's easy for them to learn. They learn a lot. And the challenge of most parents, I think, is to how do you make sure your kids learn that okay, that's true, that's not true, because they're learning everything they see, very impressionable. So I think children are like sponges, adults are like bricks. Getting new information in, changing old beliefs is not easy. It's really hard. So why would you think a mediocre person could do that?
Oh, and I was giving you a low shot.
What?
Yes, I was a solo there. You were
Okay, I thought.
you
Oh,
were by
I thought that. Yeah, I thought the internet went down. That's the favorite thing of our students.
no,
The internet is down. So I thought I was
you
just
take me
looking.
up. You a solo shot.
Okay, all right. So I'll go next time. But uh, why would we think if you take a step back and say, why would we think that mediocre people could do a good job of educating people that where it's really hard to get new knowledge into people? They have a lot of very rigid long-term beliefs that are not productive beliefs. Why would we think that mediocre people are going to be effective with those people? Because it's like a very typical thing for people in prison is, you haven't been to prison, why should I believe you? You don't know what it's like. Or you haven't been successful, why should I listen to what you say? And if you really were successful, why would you be teaching in prison? Why would you be doing that? And so I think we took a wrong turn thinking that having prison, having state employees who are basically mediocre people, and there's nothing wrong with mediocre people. Mediocre people are mediocre. It's the average person. Why would we think that I guess it kind of sounds bad. So I'm going to say, why would we think that the average person would be good at educating people who really need a lot of help?
That is an interesting perspective, and a lot of times I don't think people really look at it from that point of view. Ed, is that this is a huge problem, and that maybe the the reason why you're able to produce a better result maybe than the system is able to produce is because you've got people who are very passionate about this, your organization, you're coming in with a specific goal that you truly want to help prisoners to transition back to society. Whereas the state has a lot of responsibilities. They have to house them for this length of time while they're in there, they have to protect them. You have, it seems to me, like a much more focused mission and purpose. And that's probably why they really like having you in there, because you have that something that you're only thinking about. How can we put these prisoners in positions to be able to transition back into society in a more successful way, as I had mentioned before, setting them up to win.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. But I would not say that they're happy to have us in there. Uh, it's kind of human
Really?
nature. Yeah, I would not say they're happy at all because, um, and I think, again, this is part of the problem. I mean, just think about it. If you're an average person and somebody who's a little bit beyond average, a little bit more average than you, comes in, and for less money, they can do a better job. How do you feel? Is it like, yeah, you go for it. We're behind you 100%. It's like, well, you're not better than us. You're, um, you know, you're really not better than us. And it gets to be kind of competitive. It's just, again, the system is structurally, it's not structurally a good system, which is why you don't see the structure of a prison system out in the real world where there's competition. You don't see a monopoly, which is the prison system is a monopoly. You don't see a monopolistic thing being effective out there in the real world. This is like, we get to do it the way we want to do it. We have the programs we have our budget. Our budget's never enough. But it comes back to why would good people want to work in prison? Why would a talented person want to work in prison when the system isn't set up to help them succeed? So you only get average people because good people don't stay. Really talented people don't stay. My hunch is if we gave everybody that worked inside of a prison an IQ test, there would be very, very few people that had an IQ of, the percentage of people with an IQ over 100 would be very small.
Interesting.
There wouldn't be a lot. And, it's the way it is. But this is why I think it's important for the community to understand that it's not the prison system's job to educate and rehabilitate people. It's not really their job, because if it was really their job, they would not have mediocre or average people doing it. You'd have really talented people doing it. And, so our program was created by Nolan Bushnell, who's the founder of Atari and Chuck E. Cheese. And he started from just a blank slate of, how do you help people who've been to prison learn new things so that they can become successful? And everything we do follows from that. And we hire people who have been to prison and in our program. So they can say to our students, our new students, I was where you were one time. Here's where I am now. I'm way better off than I was before, and I'm going to be better in 2 years when I can buy a house, or when I'm going to be better. And then people believe it. And, people can say, successful people, professionals teach amateurs to be professionals. Amateurs teach amateurs to be amateurs. And so having a curriculum designed by Nolan Bushnell, the founder of Atari and Chuck E. Cheese, you should expect that would be a better program than what average people would come up with or implement. So, but again, I think it really comes back to how do we get the community to help? Because as you repeated back to me, these people are going to be coming out of prison. They're going to be coming to our communities. Why wouldn't we want them to be successful?
Absolutely, I agree. And the more we can educate society about the realities of why it's important to have an organization like yours working with the prison to make transitions into society, members of society. Again, the information was fascinating. It was fascinating when I was listening to your talk over at Lions. You went into even more depth today, and so I just really appreciate you stopping by. How can our audience get in contact with you if they want to help out in any way with, I think, incredibly important cause that you are a part of?
Well, thank you. So I would really encourage anybody to come by our school and see for themselves. We're located at 734 East Sahara. So that's 7 blocks from the Las Vegas Boulevard on Sahara. Our website is www.novum, N-O-V, as in Victor U, the letter M, hyphen U, the letter U.com, novumu.com. And novum means new in Latin. So new you. So what we try to do is create a new you. Our phone number is 765-537-8480. So people always call. We get 40, 50 calls a day from prison, from people in prison. And we're actually, maybe this is a thing that we can do, the community can do if you want to help. We're creating we want to create a thing where people who are in prison can just call and talk to somebody. They're not going to call your cell phone, but they're going to call a number, and you're going to be able to take the call and just talk to people in prison. They don't need to know who you are. They can't reach you. There's not really anything to worry about. And the calls are always recorded in the prison anyway, so no inmate is going to do something that's going to get them in trouble. But there's some people in prison there's a lot of people in prison that just have no one to talk to. All they have to talk to are other people who don't know what they're doing. And so anybody, maybe sometime off this thing, Guy, we can talk about how could we help enable people who want to talk to people who want to help people in prison just by talking to them. Just a 15-minute conversation. Because there's still no visiting in prison. Your family can't come visit you.
Yeah, I think eye-opening a lot of people to even know that such a program exists. They learned about what recidivism is by listening to this podcast, and the opportunities that are available to improve our society by helping the prison population, the ones who really want to help. And I do believe there are a lot of people out there who don't want to maintain in that cycle. Just as you mentioned, there are some that will always be in that cycle. There's nothing you can really do for them. But the ones who really want to change their lives, why wouldn't we help them to do that? And again, I think your organization is doing outstanding work. And if there's any way that I can contribute to your success, absolutely. Thank you so much for being a part of this podcast today.
Thank you, Guy. Thank you again. And I invite you to come here. Maybe we can go have lunch.
Absolutely. I'd love to come for a visit sometime soon.
Great. Thank
All
you.
right. Thank all of you for tuning into the Voices of Humanity show. We had Ed Bevilacqua. He is with Novum U, an organization that is doing some amazing work in helping to educate prisoners and assisting them in transitioning back into society. And he has given the information, and we are always broadcasting the voices of our humanity, people who are making a difference in our world. And we encourage you all to tune into the next edition of the Voices of Humanity show here at prconnectionsradio.com, the voice of new media. Take care of yourselves.